Hey there everyone and welcome to Hope Daily. I'm running a little bit later with this one, so I thought I'd catch you up at lunchtime instead of our normal kind of breakfast morning routine. Today we are in Esther chapter 2. Matt did a great overview and introduction to Esther chapter 1 and the whole book of Esther yesterday in his Hope Daily. So today we'll just be looking at the second chapter where Esther is made queen effectively. So we'll just kind of run through the text. Let me know if you're watching. Say hi. Let me know how your day is going. Yeah, let's do this together. It says in Esther chapter 2, it says, so later when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. So that's the queen that had almost kind of like spoken out or kind of like rejected King Xerxes, and he kind of got in a bit of a strop about it. Hi there, Jane. Hope you're okay. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for the beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. So remember that God's people are in exile at the time in Babylon, in Susa, underneath the reign of kind of King Xerxes. So they are like slaves or bondservants to the Persians. Let them be placed underneath the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king and he followed it. So what we can see is that God is using this situation, God is using this circumstance where Vashti kind of opposed the king and was kind of removed from her position. And really it was a sense of injustice, really, because, King Xerxes kind of sounded like he had a bit of a selfish arrogance, in regards to Queen Vashti. But yeah, even so, God used this situation to displace Queen Vashti and to create a place for Esther to fulfill her role, which would be so crucial and central to the role of this story, as Matt described yesterday. So now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So here we get introduced to this girl called Esther. She has a cousin called Mordecai, and so Esther's kind of got two names. Her other name is Hadassah, and maybe one of those would maybe be maybe like a Babylonian name or a name given to her, or people in the Bible often will get multiple names. But it's interesting, one thing I didn't realise was that Esther was an orphan, is that both her mother and father had died. It doesn't tell us when or how, but it says that Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter, and brought her up. So it must have been when she was young, so before she reached the age of adulthood. So this little orphan girl, who's been carried off into slavery, carried off into exile with all of her extended family, comes on the scene. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favour. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. So from the get-go, Esther kind of gets picked to kind of be part of this royal beauty pageant. Miss America, or not Miss America, Miss Persia. Effectively, she becomes Miss Persia, and she gets favoured. Matt says, I'm not even going to read that comment. So she gets she gets chosen to kind of be part of this play. Part of this thing, there must have been loads and loads of girls. If you remember, King Solomon had 300 concubines recorded in the Bible. Now that wasn't a good thing. That was a bad thing. God did not condone that. But if you think, Solomon had 300 concubines, and King Xerxes probably had a much bigger empire, a much maybe a more powerful nation than Solomon had at that time. So you can maybe guess, hundreds, must have been hundreds of women at that time, and yet Esther was chosen as the one. We'll go on to see that the king favoured her above all. So again, you see the sovereign hand of God putting her into the right location to do what he wants to do. Verse 10, Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now, the reason why she didn't reveal her background, her ethnicity, was that because she was a Jew, she was a Hebrew, she was a slave, she was a bondservant to the Persians, and so that would have carried a stigma, a disgrace. She would have been seen as lower. She would have faced racial indifference, and all of the issues that we see today with people, say like refugees in our country, people give them an unfair stigma, and this is effectively her. She's like a refugee in a country, carried off into a country that isn't her own, it isn't her own language, isn't her own culture, and she's keeping her nationality a secret. Why? Because it carries a sense of shame, it carries a sense of dishonor. Verse 12, before a girl's turn came up to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women. So this is called the L'Oreal treatment. 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. She was definitely worth it, wasn't she? And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shazgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by her name. So essentially you've got this big group of women who are kind of virgins, and they kind of go one by one to the king, and then after they been with the king, slept with the king, they then become a concubine. Now, what we can see really is that this, God certainly doesn't really condone this situation. God loves, a marriage between one man and one woman forever, which is a lifelong and love-filled and, a servant-hearted marriage, not the exploitation and of women like this. And it just shows that even in these kind of like foreign cultures, even in these old cultures that that did not follow the ways of God, yet God was still working. Like God was still using His divine hand to control and to dictate what was going on, even in situations that were just not great. Jane says makes Love Island seem tame. Yeah, that's right. I mean, honestly, this is just crazy, isn't it? I mean, yeah. Anyway, verse 15. When the turn came for Esther, the girl Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Hegai, the king's eunuch, was in charge of the harem, suggested, and Esther won the favour of everyone who saw her. So it doesn't actually say what she asked for. It says that she could ask for something, but it doesn't really detail what. And then she won everyone's favour. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month of Tebeth. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any other woman, and she won his favour and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. And how amazing is that? Is that Esther becomes queen, out of hundreds of girls that this kind of like big cruel king could have chosen. He chose Esther, who was an orphan girl of a foreign and kind of slave nation. And the chances of him picking her are just like slim to none. It's like like 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a few thousand. Chances of like how on earth could this even happen? But yet God makes it happen for His purpose. God is the one who's kind of thrusting her to position, creating a space for it, and His hand. Even though it doesn't say like God is directly guiding all of this, it's so clear and obvious that He is just working in the background. I mean, just think about it. This refugee orphan girl becomes queen overnight, and it's just crazy. This is like where Oliver Twist truly gets its story from, just the girl version. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. So remember, Mordecai is Esther's cousin who raised her. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do so, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. Now that actually shows a sense of honor, that Esther honored Mordecai, for bringing her up. She didn't shrug, she didn't give the whole teenager attitude and shrug off the authority of her superiors, but respected his wishes. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hanged on a gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So again, we've got this like situation where Mordecai is just by chance sitting next to the king's gate. He overhears a conversation about a conspiracy to kill the king. Now, it's not really a king that he has any really care or concern for, but he honors the king just because he honors God. He honors those in authority above him, and so therefore he honors the king of Persia, King Xerxes, and so he reveals this conspiracy to kill this king. And what we see is that later on this plays a crucial part of the story, because King Xerxes remembers or finds out that it was Mordecai who revealed this, and he honors him, and which plays a crucial part in the story to redeem the Jews effectively from genocide. The whole story is about a plan of genocide and God's hand to stop that. So yeah, we just have this amazing story where this orphan refugee slave girl is made queen, and yet God's sovereign hand is so on it. And it just reminds us, hey, that our value is placed in God. Hey, that whatever happens in our life, that you might be watching now or later, and that maybe you're an orphan yourself, or maybe you've had a very troubled past, and maybe you've got something to hide. Esther hid her nationality, hid her race, because for the sake of making life easier. Maybe you've got things to hide as well. But your value is dictated by God, just as her value was. She became a queen overnight by God's sovereign hand. That just reminds us that we are children of God, despite our past, despite our failure, and yet God's grace just goes before and exalts us. So yeah, trust in Him, put your hope in Him, and what an amazing story, eh? So God bless. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Comment if you've got any questions or comments, and we'll see you later. God bless. Bye bye.